So I recently passed my CKAD exam and I want to share the things I learned, the areas I focused on, and any tips that I learned along the way. Jumping straight in, the exam environment is a remote proctored exam and you take it from the comfort of your own home. You need to have your desk clear and nothing in the way. You're allowed a glass of water, you could take breaks, but you won't be given any time allowance for it, and it's about a 2-hour exam. You're allowed an external monitor if you're working from a laptop, just as long as the other screen is closed or turned off, and it's a good thing to have an external webcam as well. The main reason being, when they want to see your environment, it's easier to just pick up the webcam and just show it around, rather than trying to pick up your laptop and show that around. Quick note on grading for the exam, this is all done using automation scripts. There is no person at the end of it that is checking your work. That you have at the end of the exam, when you finish it, you'll get a note to say that they'll give you your results within the next 24 hours. It sometimes can take longer. If you've watched my video, which you can find here, you can find out that actually it took about 3 or 4 days for my results to come through, and I explained there why that happened. It's important to remember there is a script that marks this, so spelling errors will be penalised. To also help anyone looking to take the exam, I've written a blog which includes all the topics that we're going to discuss in this video, and I'll share a link for that down below. When I took one of my first Kubernetes exams a couple of years ago, you had to go in, and one of the first things you did was you set up your kubectl alias and also your autocomplete for the commands. That's not necessary anymore. The environment comes pre-packaged with this already configured, so you don't have to worry about it. It is still available in the quick reference guide at the top. It's one of the first things. You can see it just here. But you don't have to do that in your environment anymore for the exam. Each question will be on a different node, so you'll have to SSH to that, essentially switching the context and ensure that you're in the right location for that question. Going back to how the exam is marked, they only look in one location per question. So if the script says you're looking on node A for question 1, that's where it's going to go. If you accidentally answer the wrong question in the wrong place, you're not going to get any points for it. So it's very important to make sure you pay attention to that when you first start the question. Now at the top there will be a copy command which is the command you need to change nodes. Just ensure that you use that and don't try and type it, because if you put the wrong number or you put the wrong letter and you connect to the wrong node, again you won't get any points. So it's an important note and it's worth remembering. Now the copy option isn't only available for connecting to the new node for each question, it is also available for a lot of other inputs. So if you need to manipulate a YAML file using Vim, here's an environment variable, set this environment variable in the deployment, and it's a highlighted box, you can copy it. So please ensure you do copy it. That way you avoid any spelling errors and you won't get marked down for that. The exam is about 2 hours long. Well, the exam is 2 hours long, and it contains between 16 to 22 questions. So on average, that's about 5 to 7 minutes per question. And it's important to manage your time when you're taking the exam. And that may seem like an obvious one, but it's very easy under the pressures of the exam to get lost and get stuck on a question for more than 10 minutes. And that's 3 questions worth of time nearly. If you get stuck, you have a flag option available, so you can just flag that question, and also there's a notepad available. So if you've started some work, if you've done some work on that question, and then you got stuck, make a note of where you are, flag it, and then move on. The worst thing will be if you spend too much time on that you can't actually finish the questions that you do know the answers to. It can happen. Just remember, the goal of this exam is not to get a perfect score of 100, it's just to pass. Once you've passed, you've got the certification. If you feel like there was an area that you should have been stronger on, you can focus on that after the exam. Don't try and improve yourself during the exam. Just get the question done. It's important to read the question twice and to the end. Some of the questions are written in a way that you might be able to assume what's going to happen or assume what they need, but actually the real question's like in the second half, if that makes sense. So let's say this is the question, you read this bit and oh yeah, all I have to do is read carefully. easy, and then you go and answer it. But actually, you need to understand exactly what the question is. But you didn't read that far, so you don't know. Bad example, but you know what I'm saying. Read it all the way to the end, then start working in the terminal. If you start manipulating, changing things halfway through the question, and then you go back and you're just going to lose track of where you are. And unless you've made copies of files that you've changed, you've stuffed it. As important as it is to manage your time and ensure you're actually getting through it at a reasonable pace, you need to take your time and understand what you're doing as well. YAML and Vim are a massive part of not only this exam, but a couple of the others as well. You need to be comfortable with Vim and with YAML files. You need to understand indentation to a degree, and well, you need to understand indentation, and also you need to know how to enter, exit, save with Vim. I have put a couple of quick commands here. You can see sort of like exit, save, quit, force quit, undo. I would say if you can do these ones, you'll be fine for the exam. You should be able to do it. If you know more, then you could probably do it faster. But this would be the bare minimum to be able to take the exam and be successful with Vim. Equally, there's terminal commands that you need to understand because the environment doesn't provide you with an IDE. You don't have like a VS Code or a JetBrains solution to work with. You are working within the terminal, which means everything is done on the command line. You need to know how to manipulate files, move files, make copies, and also echo things as well. If you need to create a file copy, you might need to, for example, use a kubectl tops command to identify a high CPU usage pod, and then you need to save it to a file. So you need to know how to do that, and that would be, you run your command and you would output it using the greater than, less than, greater than, the greater than to a file. And then being comfortable with YAML, Vim, and the terminal, that's going to give you the speed you need to actually answer the questions within the, your average time that we're expecting, that 5 to 7 minutes. The last thing you want to be doing is spending too much time just navigating. Like, you know how to answer the question, you just don't know how to get to the right section of the terminal. That would really suck. On top of navigating the terminal, you need to be able to navigate the Kubernetes documentation. Nearly every exam I've taken, this is my third one now, I think, there is at least one question where I have to go and reference the documentation. So as you know, during the exam you have access to the official Kubernetes documentation, and they give you a web browser within the virtual machine that you're working on. You need to be able to fly around this. So like one that always catches me out in terms of, I don't know why, it just does. It's persistent volumes. Right? Persistent volumes always, like, it's just one of these ones where I end up putting the mount path or like the volume mount just in the wrong order. I mean, I'm better now, but definitely when I've taken my previous exams, it's caught me out. But it's okay, because I know I can go here. And since I've played with the documentation, I've read a lot of what I've needed. Whilst this, like the top one, is really good information. It tells me what a persistent volume is. It tells me the life cycle, binding, all this information. This is great, but it's not actually what I need. What I need is the second one down, which is how to configure a pod to use it. In here, this will give me a template for a persistent volume. It'll give me a template for the claim, and it will give me a template for the pod. So I know that if a question comes up with persistent volumes and I want to just check my work, say that I've managed my time in a way that I have time to proof and just make sure all my indentation is correct and my ownership is correct, I can come directly here and check it out. And because I've familiarized myself with the documentation, I know which title I'm looking for, and I would be looking for this one. So that is something I highly recommend to anyone looking to take any exam, is become familiar with these. They're here for a reason. They're here to be used. In addition to the documentation, you have a couple of commands in the kubectl that help you with your YAML construction. So kubectl explain is a great one for if you don't know where something needs to go within the file. So let's say, for example, you need to add a service account name to a deployment. So there's an existing deployment. the question is add a service account name, or you need to correct the service account name, you need to know where that goes in the deployment manifest. So you can use the explain command to go explain deployment dot spec. It's normally a safe one, and we know that it's going to be, well, it's not here under spec, so in all likelihood it's going to be under template, so we can add an additional, right, spec template. Cool. And now we've only got a couple of other fields. So we've got the pod spec. So this is the service account for the pods. That was the question, theoretical question. We're going to hit pod spec. So we're going to hit spec. And here we can see the entire list of the information for that would be underneath the spec. So that would be the path. I know this is a little bit, all over the place, but we've got deployment.spec.template.spec. And then under there, you would get your service account, which we can see here. So we've got service account there and service account name. It also gives you a link to Kubernetes documentation. So this is why the explain command is really helpful. It's really useful and something you want to become familiar with. Equally so, the create command is really good. So if you wanted to just create a deployment and you need to add variables, or if you need to create a secret, but sometimes you're not sure how to complete it, the help flag is actually really helpful. Pun, it's not pun though, but intended. So you got kubectl create secret, right? And then we'll pass the help flag, and it's telling us that it can't go any further unless we pass a type. So we've got generic docker TLS. So let's give it generic. And here we can see the full output of what we need to create a legitimate command. So down at the bottom, and this is the same for like deployment and other resources that you can create, is it gives us the name, right? We need to name it something, and then we can give it a type, we can provide it a file, we can provide it a literal key value pair. And there's all these additional flags up here. The top of the help command, when you get to this level, is a bunch of examples. So say you had a question for create a secret with the value of foobar, right? You go here. If you didn't know off the top of your head, you can go, well, I know what it is, so I'm going to be passing a literal value. This is the command I need. Create secret from literal, and you would change the key one, and you would change, key one to foobar, or foo, and super secret to bar, and you're done. You can apply that command, it'll create the secret. I can even probably take that command and just show you. So what did we say? We said from literal, we go foo bar, and we go kubectl get secret, and we should see it, right? What do they even call it? Yeah, we called it my secret. So yeah, there it is, nice and easy. And I can output that as YAML, and I can see here, you can see here in my data that it's encrypted in base 64 as well, and it's data foo bar. And if I really wanted, there are other ways of doing this. This is like a quick and dirty way of doing it. Echo that, and we can go base 64 decode. I think that's right. Yeah, there you go. Bar. And there's a secret, and that's kind of how easy and quick it can be when using the help flag to generate commands. Now, as you just saw me use there, I used the output YAML command, or the output YAML flag, and that's a very common one to be used during exams, as well as the dry run. So the dry run will give you the output without actually creating the resource. So, for example, let me take this. Right, so the question is, create a deployment called Nginx with the image Nginx, which is what we have here. So we've got deployment Nginx, image Nginx, and I want you to add an environment variable to it of foobar. I was like, okay, cool. So what are our options? We can either vim into a fresh file and write a whole deployment, which is not practical. You can go to the documentation. You can find, I'm sure you can find a deployment there, and you can copy it and paste it, which again is doable, but not what I would do. And then this is our other option. This is what I would do. So this command alone is just going to give us an output like this. Now we could just copy and paste this into a file, but we can do it even quicker or more efficient by just creating, using that greater than, and going deployment.yaml. And that is just going to output this YAML into that file. We can jump straight into it, and then here it is. We can manipulate this, and that's how quick and easy it is. I mean, that's what, like, I don't know, 20 lines, and you've done it with one command. For the sake of, let's just put it in here. So we'll go name, we'll go foo, and with a value of bar. Okay, I think that's right. You can do your kubectl apply -f deployment, and it's deployed. So we can check that now. So we can do kubectl get deployments. Right, there's our deployment. That's the one we've just created. We can see that because it's like 10 seconds old. We can output it as a YAML, which again is why this YAML flag is super helpful, because it's a really easy way to sort of like see what's going on here, and it puts it in like a readable manner. And we can see that where was it? There we go. Boom. There's our environment variables, and that looks right. I think that looks right. But there is another way to check. We could even go into, and this is a helpful way of checking to see if your environment variables are actually set within the pod. Right? I know that was a mouthful, but if we clear that, and we go kubectl get pods, there's our nginx pod, and we can execute -i into this pod. Give me this pod. Right, we'll etc into the pod, and we'll pass through the command of just env, and it will give us all our environment variables. And we can see there, it's the third one down, it's foo bar. So kind of like, I mean, that, I don't know how long that took, like what, 2 or 3 minutes. Create a deployment, updated the variables, and then we validated our changes as well. It's a fairly easy task to complete. Don't forget as well, you can also pass in like we can grep, so we can grep on that, and it just picks up what we're looking for. It's a pretty helpful tool, and this command is nothing special either. This is just you know, we're executing into the pod. That's it. If it's in a namespace, you can pass the namespace flag. If you want a working terminal to get into, you go, you know, bin shell. As long as it's installed, then we're in our working terminal. So right now we're connected to the pod, so you can do your env command here, and there you go. It's third line, fourth line down, foobar. Yeah. So this is just what I mean. Really super easy way to do things. That create command, very helpful, very useful. Now, so far we've covered a lot of tips on how to sort of like interact with the terminal and how to do things. And now I'm going to share with you sort of like the key areas that I focused on to be able to pass my exam on the first go. The first one coming up, it's one that I've already mentioned before, is persistent volumes and volume claims, being able to create them and being able to mount them correctly. That's an important one, and one you definitely want to focus on. Cron jobs, you're going to want to be able to create them and manipulate them, change them. You want to understand the syntax. So by that I mean that if we went to cron jobs, we'll have a look. Again, I go to the documentation for this because I always forget the syntax for the schedule. So the schedule coming down here, really, really helpful. Like in the middle of the exam, it tells you to create a cron job for X every hour. You go, okay, cool. Well, hour is our second star, so you know, just bash that at 1, and then it's every hour, and you've got all the documentation here. Definitely become comfortable with creating these, giving them different sort of like times, seeing how they behave. Super easy. You can take the YAML example and you can paste that in. Service accounts, create, view, edit. Understand the roles and the role bindings. So you know, remember that you have a service account, you have a role, and you have a role binding, and each one is going to be linked to the other. You can also have your cluster level ones. So your cluster role and your cluster role bindings. You can get a question like, you have a deployment, it's not working, the logs suggest that the service account is not working, or the service account doesn't have permission. So you need to go in and understand what you're looking for. So, you'd be like I don't think I have any service accounts configured here, by the way. Oh, only the system ones. There's a default one there as well. Okay, cool. So there's a default one. Let's have a look at that. Get service account default. Output YAML, because I like that flag. It just gives me the information. Okay, so there's my service account. There's name, there's namespace, useful information. Let's get role, kubectl git role, roles. What have I spelled wrong? kubectl git. Yeah, no roles, but have I got one anywhere else? Okay, cool. So we've got like the system role. So let's have a look at the proxy role. Kube proxy, and okay, yeah, no, obviously not, and it's in the namespace of kube system. That A flag, it's a flag to say all namespaces, which is really handy if you just can't be bothered to write the namespace and it's a small sort of like environment. Like, I know I've got nothing deployed here really, I've got like 2 or 3 things because I've spun it up just for this video. So there's only really the kube system namespace. But if you had like hundreds of namespaces, it's no good. Although saying that, you could probably do it if you were looking for a deployment, but you didn't know what namespace it was in. You could do like kubectl get deployments and all namespaces, and then you could like grep on what do we call it? We called it nginx, right? And it would find it. So it's helpful in that sense, I suppose. Not just my laziness. It is helpful. Let's go back to where we were, right? So kube system, output a YAML. So here we can see the role. So in this role, it has permissions to config maps and git. Okay, so it could be that you have a question saying that you need to add an additional verb. So like delete or watch or something. Just need to be comfortable flying around, viewing, understanding, clearing. So if that was failing, for example, and you're like, why is it failing? It could be that the git verb was missing, so you need to add it, and then everything would come back and it would start working. Rollouts is another important command to understand and understand how they work. My previous understanding, not previous understanding, but I've used the rollout command a lot, but I've only ever really used it to restart something. So if I needed to gracefully shut down the pods and move them over to a new pod, a fresh pod, then I would use the restart command. But that's not always what it's for. It has other usage. So I don't have a type deployed. There we go. So I've just started that nginx that we created earlier. So if I go get pods now, right, they'll see that there'll be some fresh pods. Yeah, 8 seconds old. So this command also has kubectl rollout. Pass that H flag again. You can see why I'm slow at exams. It's because I always have so many spelling mistakes. So rollout affects deployment stateful sets and daemon sets, which is all cool. And here we can see, look, we can undo changes, undo a rollout. We can check the status of a rollout. Restart, that's the one that I typically always use. And then we can actually change other things. We can change, well, no, sorry, that's using a selector flag, which is changing it based on the label. We can see the history, we can stop it, we can pause it, we can undo it, and lots of things. So that one I just did, so let's do rollout history, right? History, deploy, nginx, okay? And we can see here that we've got 2 versions. So there's the revision 1 would be the one that we created like just recently with the create command, and then we deployed it. And then version 2 is the one I just did with the restart. So if I hit that again and then hit history, we're now on version 3, which is really, it's really helpful. You can do this when you're if you want to test something, or if you've got like canary deployments, and you've pushed it out, and actually you don't want it anymore, so you want to roll it back. This is how you would do it. So you would go kubectl, roll out, was it undo? Undo, yeah. Undo. Deploy Nginx. And that should roll it back. So now if we go back to the history, we'll go version 1.3.4. So we've undone it, and we've reverted back, if that makes sense. I briefly touched upon Canary deployments just then as we were looking at the deployments and the rollouts. It is good to understand them as well, and the documentation, I think there is some good documentation here. Don't know why I'm writing documentations, because I'm literally saying out loud what I'm thinking, but I think it's hidden, yeah. So it's in this managing resources section. This is what I mean. So I knew it was in deployments. Comes up, you get an expert of running around the documentation to find what you want. But this is a fairly verbose understanding and explanation, of how Canary deployments work. Check it out, understand it. I put a note here, and it's worth knowing sort of the ratios type thing. So if the question is you want to release a new deployment, and you've got a new image and it's called Canary, and you've got your existing one called Stable, and you want a ratio of like 80-20. So you want 20% of traffic going to the Canary and you want 80% going to the Stable. Then you have 10 replicas. That basically means that, okay, cool. So you want two replicas of your Canary and 8 replicas of your Stable. That can get overlooked. Don't get lost in it. Normally it's not that hard, or rather, it's not normally a difficult ratio that they're expecting you to do, but you definitely should understand what it is that you need to do to hit the requirement. When working with Canary deployments, it's important to understand the kubectl label command as well. So let's say we've got our deployment here, the one that we got earlier, so kubectl git deployments, Nginx, and this output is YAML, just to see what it looks like, because it's easier. And we can see here, currently we've got labels of app Nginx, which is the default one when it was created. So we can also see it's got our match labels up here, and the other labels as well in our metadata, which is all great, it's all good. We want to update that. So let's say we're going to be creating a Stable and a Canary version. So let's do let's copy it first. Let's just call this canary.yaml. So if you were doing this in like a real world situation, you needed to update the deployment with a later version or a different image. You could make sure you copy your existing deployment YAML and then update that one. Right, so we've got our copy, that's fine. So let's do kubectl label deployment, and it's called Nginx, and we're just going to give it the label of, let's call it version equals stable. So hopefully that should give us what we want. Oh, I've already got that apparently. We'll give it the label of release equals stable. Okay, cool. So now it is labeled. So now if I have a look at that again, we'll use our output command. We should see here that we now have a new label, release stable. Good, cool. And then we can do the same thing. So let's carry on and say that the Canary release needs to be a 80-20 split, and you want 80% of traffic going to your Stable and 20 to the other. We don't need to go into the edit command to update deployment. We can do a kubectl scale deployments Nginx replicas equals, what did we say, 8. Cool. So now we can see that we've scaled it up. So we've actually done manipulation to the Nginx deployment without going into the YAML file and having to work with Vim. This is a quick and easier way of doing some of these changes. And then if we wanted to, we can go in and update our Canary with whatever it is that we wanted in here. You know, if we wanted to give this one the label of release, what did we say? We'll call this one Canary, and this one's going to be called Canary. And match labels, this is going to be, we can leave that there, that's fine, I'm not too worried about that. You know, you get the idea. And then we could do like a kubectl apply -f. What's this one called? Canary, right? Yeah. And we can have a look at this, and we can see that in our YAML we've got not YAML. This one. No. What did we call it? I can't remember. Get deployments. There we go, cool, right. Nginx Canary. I knew that. I knew that. There we go, we can see here that we've got our labels that we created. So, release Canary. So, depending on how the service is configured, it can direct traffic accordingly. This was mainly just focusing on the label command and the scale command. So, again, it would be scale deployments, Nginx Canary, and it'll be your replica flag, replicas equals 2, and it would just scale up. So now when we get our deployments, we can see here that we've got our 80-20 split. So, you know, if that was the question, we've done it. And then if we wanted to do show labels, we can see here that one's got a release of stable and one's got a release of Canary. You know, and that's fairly straightforward. Carrying on with sort of like deployment and pod manipulation, resource limits and requests, very important, need to know how to do them. Limit ranges as well, so say you need to update the resources in the deployment to match the limit range on the cluster. You can do that exact command, get limit range, and then it will come up and it will list some. And then you can use that to update your resources. So these two kind of go hand in hand in terms of understanding, all available in the Kubernetes documentation. Creating secrets is a really useful skill, not only for the exams, but generally anyway. This again is one that you can use the documentation, you can use an example YAML, or you can actually just use the create command, which is simple enough. I think we're going to do that. I think this is when I showed the help flag, we pretty much saw that, right? So generic, yeah, we've got help, we've got. So that's just, yeah. So we already did this. I'm not going to go over it again, but we created a secret, and that's important. But you also need to know how to mount that to a deployment, or mount it as a. So you can mount it as a volume or mount it as an environment variable. You want to be able to know how to do both. And again, you know, you can jump into your documentation, and your secrets is right here. So I want to do it env from, is that in here? No. So I want to do a secret env from. There you go, cool, right. So yeah, so again, this is where being able to navigate around the documentation is a really useful skill. I knew what I wanted. I wanted to see what it looks like to have the env from secret mounted as a variable. So literally in my search, I did env from secret, and here it is here. This is how you would mount it. Super easy. We've covered labels. We spoke about labels. Becomes helpful with network policies and Canary deployments. Logs. So logs is again a super helpful command, and events. Right. So kubectl get events will give you a list of information, everything that's going on. So we can see here we've got all our scaled, sort of like our scaling where we were mucking about with the deployments. Helpful, useful when you're trying to debug and figure things out. The other one is kubectl get logs. Let's do get pods first, right? So kubectl get logs. Now you can do the logs on different levels. You can do it at the deployment level, and you can do it at the pod level. The danger with doing it at the deployment level is that you get the what have I done here? Get logs. Deployment Nginx. Oh, it's because I've put get logs. kubectl logs deployment nginx. There we go. So this is great, it's really useful, and here's a bunch of logs, but this is all of the logs for this deployment, so all 8 replicas. What can happen is that they'll all get muddled in. So this, you might miss something, which is why deployments are great, but doing it at a pod level is more fine-grained, and you should do it that way. So we'll get the pod, get pods, and then we can do logs there. So the benefit of doing it at this level is you get the information for the pod that you want to look at. The downside is you got to do a bit of copy and paste to get the pod name, because they're normally like a unique identifier at the end. Using deployment can be done, but you need to be aware that it will be a consolidation of all the logs, so sometimes things can get missed. Getting down to the end of some of the useful information, or what I believe is useful information to help you pass the exam, is understanding Docker Podman. Now, when I took the exam, they were both available. I've traditionally used Docker. I've played with Podman, but it's not embedded yet. Generally, you should know how to do a Docker push and Docker build, but also a Docker save. So I've actually got an example output here. This is pulled from the, where did I pull this from? I think I pulled it from Docker documentation. Another useful tool is the kubectl top command. Basically, it will give you an output of the memory usage and CPU usage of pods, and then you can pass through the sort by flag, which is this flag here, and it will organize it in a way to put the highest usage at the top. So if you did sort by CPU, highest CPU usage would be at the top. You can then identify that pod, and memory is the other option for the sort by flag. Some of the resources that I used, I've linked here in this blog. I've got the standard documentation, so the one that we've actually been referencing several times throughout the video. Killer Coda, which of course is a free resource created by the same person that did Killer Shell. This, I think you get like an hour in your free usage, and you can go through this, and this gives you like a simulation that you can work with. It also actually gives you just a playground as well. Obviously, we've got all the different scenarios here that we can play with, but there's also just a playground. So if you just want to spin one up, I would need to sign in. If you just want to spin one up and start running some kubectl commands, you can do that. The other resource is the Killer Shell, which you get two exams with the purchase of your official exam. So the Killer Shell is significantly harder than the real thing. If you can pass this, then you will definitely pass the real exam. I probably get anywhere between 40 and 50% on Killer Shell, and then I feel fairly confident in my abilities. But yeah, this is it's called Killer Shell. It's brilliant, but it's absolutely soul destroying in terms of your confidence with what you're doing, because it is so difficult. And the other resource that I use is Cloud Guru. I've really liked the labs. I've used their labs several times. They give good scenarios, enough time pressure, and yeah, I feel it's good. Some of it is a little bit outdated now. There's a couple of questions on there where it's no longer part of the curriculum, but regardless, lab environments of practice are the best way to go. As I've put here, it's practice, practice, practice. You need to just be confident with what you're doing. You need to be able to fly around the terminal, and you need to just know the kubectl really well. Rounding up this video, definitely the key points to focus on are YAML and Vim, your terminal interaction with simple commands, and the kubectl. Master the kubectl to the best of your abilities. Don't spend months and months. Maybe, I think I spent maybe 3 or 4 weeks on the CKAD, and I was able to pass it, but I have worked with Kubernetes in the past. Being able to navigate the documentation. Focus on them 4 areas. I think you would be in a good place to pass this exam. It's not a memorization game. It's not like other exams with multiple choice. You can't just learn the question and know the answer or memorize the answer. You need to actually just understand what it is that you're doing. So if you get to that point, you can pass this exam no problem. I'd like to know more about the exam itself and sort of like what that experience is like. Check out this video here. I do a very in-depth sort of overview of the exam, how it's set up, what you need to do, all the prerequisites in terms of getting yourself ready, identification. Check that out, it's pretty useful. plan to take the exam, let me know down below in the comments. Feel free to reach out in the comments below and ask any questions that you might have. I'd be more than happy to help you try and get your certification.